Let's make some baklava. Today we'll make Persian style baklava with pistachios, walnuts, rose water, and cardamom. First, let's make nut filling of the baklava. And this is, I believe, the hardest part of this recipe. So what I like to do is to make double of nut filling and store half of it in the freezer. In case I want to make baklava again, I don't have to go through the trouble of grinding nuts. If you have food processor, high-speed blender, or a coffee grinder, you can use them. If you don't have any of these machines, you can chop nuts by hand. It will take some time, but it's so worth it. So here I have my pistachios done. Now let's take walnuts and chop them as well. Make sure you use unsalted walnuts and pistachios for this recipe. Of course, you can make baklava with just one type of nuts, either pistachios or walnuts. Some people make it with almonds, but I like the combination of pistachios and walnuts because pistachios are more hard and crunchy and walnuts are more soft and creamy, so it creates perfect flavor combination. Now to make the filling, you just combine all of the ingredients: 2 cups of ground pistachios, 3 cups of ground walnuts, 2.5 cups of sugar, which is half of the volume of nuts, 1 teaspoon of cardamom and 2 teaspoons of cinnamon. Remember, I'm making double dose, that's why you see 2 teaspoons of cardamom and 4 teaspoons of cinnamon here. I like to mix my spices into the sugar first, and then when it's all mixed in, I add the nuts into the sugar mixture and mix it well together again. If you cannot find ground cardamom in the grocery store and all you have is cardamom pods, you can open each of them, take the seeds out and grind them and use them as your flavoring. That's exactly what I did today. I ran out of cardamom powder and all I had was cardamom pods. So I just made my own cardamom spice. So now our nuts are done. Let's move on to the next stage of the recipe, for which we need to melt 2 sticks of butter, unsalted butter. 2 sticks is 227 grams of butter. We also need 1 package of defrosted phyllo dough. Phyllo dough is not the same as puff pastry. You can see how thin and flaky it is, and it dries out really fast. That's why I keep slightly wet paper towels on top of it to prevent dough from drying up. To make baklava, you need deep baking pan, the one that has at least 2 inches tall sides. You will have to brush some butter in the bottom, put a few layers of phyllo dough, and brush with butter again. And by few layers in the bottom, I mean 4-5 layers of your phyllo dough. Then goes your nut filling, few tablespoons spread all over. You have to make sure the nut filling is spread as thin as possible. You don't want any bumps and clumps, so make sure to spread it evenly. That way your baklava will be straight and perfect. It's basically just layering your phyllo dough sheets and filling. In the bottom and on the top, you put extra layers. As I said earlier, 4 or 5 layers of the dough. But in between the nut filling, you can put 2-3 layers of the phyllo. Depending on the size of your phyllo dough and your baking pan, you will have approximately 4 or 5 layers of each. When you're done assembling your baklava, brush the last layer of dough with butter and cut it with the knife into whatever shape you like. Traditionally, it's diamond shape. You bake your baklava for an hour at 350 degrees, and while it's baking, you make the syrup. for which you need 2 cups of sugar and 1.5 cups of water, also a 1/4 cup of rose water. So you mix your sugar and water, bring it to a boil, and when the sugar dissolves, you add 1/4 cup of rose water, mix it together, and then add 2 tablespoons of lime juice or the juice of half of the lime. It can be definitely a lemon juice, it doesn't matter. This is needed to prevent syrup from crystallizing. And also it adds a little bit of the flavor. It breaks the sweetness of the syrup. As I mentioned earlier, I made double dose of nut filling. So as you can see, I packaged the rest into a Ziploc bag. I wrote down what it is, and I'm going to store it in the freezer for later. Once your baklava is out of the oven, it's still hot, you pour the syrup over it. The syrup by this time is cooled down a bit, but the baklava has to be hot so it absorbs all of the syrup. You need to let it sit for at least a few hours, preferably overnight, and you have it. Your baklava is ready and you can enjoy it with a cup of delicious coffee or tea. I hope you've enjoyed this recipe. Let me know in the comments below if you ever tried baklava. Thank you for watching.